Revealed, homeless girl's incredible act of kindness transforming a billionaire's life forever. Mark Anderson stood under the relentless San Francisco rain, a torrential downpour that mirrored the chaos inside him. His father's death had left a gaping hole in his world, one that no amount of wealth could fill. Years spent building his once thriving tech company now felt like a cruel joke. A sudden collapse had transformed him from a revered mogul into a shadow, crafting a life encased in materialism yet void of emotion. Could all his riches truly mean nothing when the evening gatherings dissolved into hollow echoes, reminding him of the estrangement from his family? As he wandered the rain-soaked street, his mind raced with anguish. Was this life meant to inspire envy? Just then, his gaze fell on an unexpected sight. A girl, perhaps no older than 17, knelt on the pavement. She shielded an injured stray dog with her body, her hands soaked yet steady. Her compassion pierced through his fog of self-pity, igniting a spark of hope within him. Before he could second-guess his instincts, he stepped closer. Lily's chalk drawings began to unfold like a fierce tempest coming alive on the pavement, each stroke vibrant against the gray backdrop. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Mark found himself captivated. He inched forward, desperate to understand this young woman who gleaned beauty from pain. There was depth in her art, a raw creativity that mirrored her struggles. He felt drawn to this bright star juxtaposed against his dim existence. Days turned into weeks, and their connection blossomed unexpectedly. Mark found himself revealing parts of his spirit he'd long since shuttered away, while Lily revealed her dreams of artistic expression. She captured his heart with her courage as they shared both laughter and fears. But beneath the surface, a gnawing tension brewed, one he couldn't ignore. In his affluent circles, whispers of jealousy began to circulate. Friends questioned his mentoring of a homeless girl, speculating he'd lost his edge in the cutthroat tech world. A pang of unease settled in Mark's stomach like a stone. He was torn. Should he stay true to their friendship or yield to the pressures of his former life? The looming shadows of his old world weighed heavier with each passing day. Dread clouded his mind, and yet Lily's spirit continued to shine brightly in stark contrast. The day of the gallery opening approached, and Mark's phone buzzed with news of a high-stakes tech conference that could bring him back into the spotlight. His heart raced. Could he really choose between rejuvenation of his career or fostering Lily's promising artistic legacy? The mere thought sent his pulse racing. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Mark's mind spiraled. How could he prioritize a conference filled with self-serving entrepreneurs when Lily's moment of triumph was just around the corner? The thought of returning to the same endless cycle of pursuit felt suffocating, forcing him to confront the depths of his own inadequacies. Anger bubbled within him, the jealousy of peers, the fear of losing Lily's friendship, the haunting memories of his father's disappointment. The night cloaked the city and the rain started to let up. Mark stood at the precipice of a life-altering decision. Deep down, he sensed the tension tightening around him. Would he follow the path of recognition, risking the connection he had grown to cherish? Or would he step away from the industry that had once defined him to embrace the transformative potential within Lily's dream? The stakes were higher than ever, and time was running out. The ink was still wet on their journey, but the future remained ominous. What would he ultimately sacrifice to uplift another? Mark's heart raced as he paced back and forth in his upscale apartment, the evening sunlight casting long shadows across the polished floor. The looming decision tore through him like a relentless tempest. The weight of his choices, each one echoing with the voices of friends doubting him, made the air thick with anxiety. What would it mean to abandon the only life he knew in exchange for a fleeting moment of artistry? He couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that his decision would either reaffirm or shatter his identity. He reached for his phone, contemplating if he should respond to one of the invitations pinging incessantly from his tech world acquaintances. They would all be at the conference, celebrating innovation and vision. But the thought of mingling with those who had once praised his ambition left him unsettled. Their laughter would ring hollow in his ears, a stark reminder of the emotional void he languished in. The allure of accolades was becoming increasingly overshadowed by an ember of sincerity that flickered every time he thought of Lily. Their gallery opening was more than an event, it was a declaration of hope grounded in resilience. Mark had seen the late nights she spent painting and talking about her dreams, each stroke of her brush adding color to a life that had been predominantly gray. Guilt gnawed at him for even contemplating abandoning her now. After all, their friendship was an unlikely bond that had emerged from their respective hardships. As he gazed out at the city below, Mark's resolve was tested. This wasn't merely about choosing a girl over a conference, it was about his willingness to prioritize something genuine over a facade of success. He thought about the hollow victories that once defined him, the accolades that felt more like chains than achievements. Could he sever those ties that had shackled his spirit for so long? Mark pulled up the gallery details online, scanning through Lily's stunning artwork shared by locals already excited about her talent. Comments poured in with admiration for her spirit and creativity. He felt a swell of pride mixed with apprehension. There was a chance she could touch hearts with her creations. Yet, the voices of his old world echoed in the corners of his mind. Don't throw away your future on a whim. Could he forsake that world entirely for a fragile dream, no matter how bright? A quick glance at his watch jolted him back to reality. The gallery opening was set for tonight. He had just hours to decide. Mark made his way to his closet, fingers grazing past suits that represented both his past achievements and that life he now struggled to embrace. As he began to change into something more casual, he caught sight of his reflection. The man standing there seemed both familiar and foreign, smiles from vintage gala events juxtaposed against the raw vulnerability he had shared with Lily. The visceral choice before him felt monumental as he finally took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. For the first time in years, he felt liberated to redefine success. He couldn't control the opinions of others, but he could control his actions. Clarity washed over him as he grabbed his keys and headed out, heart pounding with uncertain optimism. As he stepped onto the rain-slicked streets, a sudden phone call disrupted his thoughts. It was Lily. Her voice trembled as she spoke of her fears for the night. Mark paused, realizing that he need not walk alone through this trepidation. Maybe they could stand together in their vulnerabilities tonight, but as he prepared to reassure her, a rush of hesitance followed. There was something else happening behind the scenes at the gallery that could threaten everything. In this moment of newfound courage, the horizon shifted ominously, exposing unforeseen risks. The true test was just beginning. What unforeseen challenges awaited them tonight? The distant hum of the city enveloped Mark as he navigated the streets toward the gallery. The drizzle had intensified, casting a somber veil over his surroundings, but the storm brewing within him was far more tempestuous. Moments before making the turn towards the gallery's entrance, he hesitated. Dark clouds of doubt swirled in his mind. This was not just a casual outing. Tonight held significance. Potentially irreversible transformation lay ahead. As he clutched the gallery's flyer tightly, he recalled Lily's words from earlier in the call. Her uncertainty had struck a chord deep within him. What if nobody shows up? What if my work isn't good enough? Each "what if" felt like an echo of his own fears. They paralyzed him in moments, often leaving him shackled to a path that felt predetermined, a life scripted by the ambitions of others. Upon stepping inside, the atmosphere burst into vibrant hues, an eclectic culmination of creativity and anticipation. Guests mingled, each adorned in their own interpretations of style, from minimalistic chic to avant-garde extravagance. Mark's arrival was met with a wave of chatter and laughter, a palpable undercurrent of excitement that made his heart race. Yet, as he scanned the crowd, he felt a piercing isolation. They were all interlinked through their success, while he teetered on the brink of something authentic. He was caught between the allure of a world that celebrated polished facades and the raw, unrestrained passion he witnessed in Lily's work. His gaze settled upon her paintings, ethereal canvases that seemed to breathe life. There she was, standing near her featured work, her essence radiating with confidence. Lily had made a choice to expose her vulnerabilities through art, to invite the world to connect with her story. Each brushstroke encapsulated pain transformed into beauty, inviting viewers to join her on this emotional journey. Mark approached her, adrenaline coursing through him. "Lily, you are incredible," he managed to murmur, grappling with his own surge of admiration mixed with envy. Did she even realize the courage she wielded? She turned, eyes brightening momentarily as ignorance of his internal battle failed to dampen her spirit. "Thanks, Mark," she replied softly, her gratitude rich with authenticity. "But I can't shake this fear that it's not enough." He stood there, caught in the whirlwind of his thoughts, uncertain if he should reveal his ongoing struggle. The pressure to uphold his previous persona felt suffocating, yet the transparency of the evening's ambience beckoned him to unravel his complexities too. Suddenly, the gallery door swung open with a force that garnered collective gasps. A figure stood there, an unexpected visitor with a commanding aura. The well-known art critic, renowned not just for her sharp tongue but for illuminating the lives and talents of those like Lily. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as excitement mounted. The moment slipped from exhilarating to precarious, casting shadows over the room brighter than any spotlight. Lily's face paled. "What if she doesn't like my work?" Mark saw her insecurities surging like waves crashing against her confident facade. The critic's presence transformed the gallery opening into a minefield, her judgment a possibility looming like a guillotine ready to fall. What if the one person whose opinion could catapult Lily's career into the stratosphere chose to slice through her dreams instead? Mark felt an urge to shield her, to seek a position of strength where he could confront this potential threat, but he was still grappling with uncertainty for himself. "Lily," he said with determination, his voice steadying. "This is your moment. Do not let her dictate your worth." But behind that motivating conviction loomed his own conflict, an invitation to step into the unknown. Standing at the crossroads of failure and triumph, did he possess the talent to confront the critic on behalf of both himself and Lily? In that pivotal moment, Mark felt the tide shift within him, and he knew this was the beginning of something far greater than he had considered, a chance to embody the very authenticity he valued. As the critic advanced, eyes scanning the art, and the weight of the gathering pressed ever closer around them, Mark took a breath and prepared for confrontation. He realized that this struggle was not just for Lily's success, it was a declaration of his own existence and a reckoning of his choices that would reverberate in surprising ways. Could he find the courage to define his own narrative tonight, or would fear keep him shackled in a reality he no longer chose to inhabit? The moment loomed, and a storm of possibilities awaited as they stood on the precipice of revelation. As the critic glided past a vibrant canvas, Mark felt a tightening in his chest. Around him, laughter and chatter continued, but he was anchored in a maelstrom of personal stakes. He watched intently as the critic inspected another piece, a momentary reprieve before she would inevitably reach Lily's work. Mark squeezed the flyer in his hand, a small reminder of the uncertain path he was treading, one that intertwined his ambitions with Lily's burgeoning talent. "Mark." The sound of Lily's voice pulled him back to the present. Her expression held a mixture of uncertainty and determination. "What do you think she'll say?" "It doesn't matter what she says," he responded, surprising himself with the firmness in his own words. "This is all about you and your art. It speaks for itself." But beneath the surface, doubt gnawed at him. Could he truly embrace such authenticity? His past of conforming to expectations loomed like shadows at twilight, familiar yet oppressive. Each critique he had received plastered misleading labels across his self-perception. The prospect of stepping into a space where he could matter, where his input could shape the outcome, felt distant, yet tonight, it beckoned. Suddenly, the critic stopped in front of Lily's central piece, a breathtaking swirl of colors and emotions reminiscent of a fractured reality mended into breathtaking hope. Silencing the crowd's fervor, she appeared lost in thought. Mark's heart raced. This was the defining moment of the night. All eyes were on them, but he couldn't banish the echoes of his past failures and fears. Mark turned briefly to notice others absorbed in the experience, drawing parallels to their own struggles, and something clicked within him, a revelation igniting a fresh determination. It was time to step away from the shadows of others' expectations, to carve a path rooted in authenticity rather than illusions. "I need to talk to her," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. Somehow, he was convinced that engaging the critic amidst this electric moment could alter the trajectory not just for Lily, but for himself as well. With a newfound sense of purpose, Mark approached the critic, who stood poised before Lily's artwork, an expression of critical contemplation on her face. As he neared, he noticed the powerful aura surrounding her. It demanded respect but also offered an opportunity, an invitation to redefine identities. "Excuse me," he began, forcing his voice into a calm steadiness he didn't entirely feel. "May I introduce a perspective on the artwork?" The critic turned slowly, her gaze sharp yet intrigued. "You're not one of the featured artists," she remarked dryly, but there was a hint of curiosity woven through her tone. "True, but I've been observing art's transformative power this evening. I'd like to share how Lily's work resonates beyond canvas and color." Each word felt like a calculated risk but held tremendous hope. "And what is your connection to the artist?" Her eyes flickered toward Lily, searching for context. "I'm a friend, but tonight, I'm an ally," he spoke without faltering. "You see, Lily's art is not just a representation of beauty, it's a testament to resilience. Her pieces invite us to explore vulnerability and strength, elements we often overlook in our fast-paced lives." The critic's brow furrowed slightly, interest piqued. Mark pressed on, crafting the narrative that had long been relegated to the shadows of his mind. He spoke about the themes trapped within Lily's work, his own experiences emerging like hidden paint splatters across an unprimed canvas. As words unfurled, the crowd seemed to inch closer, each listener captivated by his fervor. He noticed Lily standing beside them, her eyes wide with surprise but glittering with appreciation. In sharing his conviction, Mark felt the weight of his insecurities lift, replaced by an undeniable sense of strength. "Art transforms," he concluded, "but it requires courage from both the creator and those who experience it. Lily's bravery in revealing her soul deserves recognition." The room buzzed with charged energy, as if a new path had just emerged from the collective uncertainty. Mark's heart raced, exhilaration surging through him. He had taken a step towards his own narrative. But as the critique's expression turned contemplative, he realized there remained a pressing question: had he truly proven his own worth, or merely cast light on someone else's? The critic, her lips pursed in thought, finally spoke: "Your passion is noteworthy. But does that reflect in your own art?" Mark's breath caught, a cold wave of realization washing over him. The critic had turned the spotlight onto him, forcing him to confront the depths of his own fears and aspirations. In that fleeting moment, the seeds of his own possibilities began to bloom. What was his art? And would he dare step fully into the light of his capabilities? The room seemed to hold its breath, and in the stillness, Mark felt the stirrings of ambition within, one that demanded urgent scrutiny and action, each heartbeat drawing him closer to the revelations that awaited. Mark stood rooted to the spot, the critic's question echoing in his mind like a relentless metronome. "What is your art?" The query reverberated through every insecurity and ambition he had carried for so long. As he wrestled with it, a torrent of emotions surged within: fear, vulnerability, and a burgeoning drive to confront the core of his identity. He stole a glance at Lily, who remained visibly touched by his spoken words, her expression reflecting awe and gratitude. But as her eyes held his, he realized he couldn't merely remain in the shadows, echoing her narrative. It was time for him to embrace his own story. An idea flickered in Mark's mind, one he had toyed with in silent reverie yet had never dared to articulate. Gathering his courage, he chose candor. "I don't know what my art is yet, but I know I want to discover it." His voice had taken on a newfound steadiness, each word shedding layers of his prior, timid self-image. The critic raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Is that so? What stops you? Why not start now?" Mark inhaled deeply, feeling vulnerability wash over him. "I've always been afraid that my creations wouldn't measure up to expectations, either my own or those I've perceived from others. I've hidden behind the limitations I placed on myself, convinced that if I didn't pursue my own vision, I wouldn't risk failure. The critic's eyes narrowed, as if he had struck a nerve within her own experience. Failure is simply a pathway to discovery. You are standing here tonight, choosing to engage and express, despite the fear. That says more about your potential than any unproduced piece ever could. As a wave of realization crashed over Mark, he understood that this moment presented a challenge, one not just to advocate for Lily but also to assert his own worth. The critic's words were a mirror reflecting his unspoken battles but also the possibilities lurking behind them. What would it mean to actually create? To confront the fear head-on. The budding artist within him stirred, as if waking from a long slumber. But the uncomfortable truth gnawed at him. He had to practice what he preached, to shape his narrative just as he had shaped Lily's. "Okay," he stated, tone defiant yet earnest. "I'll showcase my work, whatever that may be. I'll embark on this journey, flaws and all. But you have to allow me the space to transform, just as you noted Lily's did." The critic regarded him with keen interest, a slight smile forming at the corners of her lips. "That's a commendable start, Mark. Art isn't about perfection, it's about honesty and exploration. Embrace what you can create when it is not tethered to expectation." Energized, he turned to Lily, who looked at him with a blend of pride and awe. In that moment, he could see the shared willingness to forge their own paths. They were in this together, two artists ready to embrace the unknown, threads of their experiences intertwining. "I need your support, Lily. This journey demands courage, and courage is best shared." Her nod was immediate and firm. "I'm with you, Mark. We'll face this challenge together. Whoever we're meant to become, let's discover it side by side." A newfound commitment took root within him, a desire to unearth his own essence while buoying another's creative spirit. But as palpable excitement filled him, the comment from the critic lingered like a flickering flame. "Does that reflect in your own art?" Mark knew that before he could explore his potential, he needed to confront the lingering doubts that had haunted him for far too long. This wasn't just about producing art. It was about authentically revealing himself to the world. Yet, beyond the thrill of possibility and revelation, a chasm yawned open. The risk of failure loomed large. What if he exposed his vulnerabilities only to face ridicule? What if his deepest fears resurfaced, dragging him back into a cycle of self-doubt? As the room faded into a blur of colors and sounds, his next step crystallized before him. It was time to forge ahead, but he knew the path wouldn't be linear. A question began to form, sharp as a blade. Was he truly prepared to face everything that came with the challenge of self-discovery? And as he placed one foot forward, the weight of his convictions lifted him into uncharted territory, where the ambiguity of his journey awaited. Mark awoke the next morning with a palpable sense of determination. The sunlight filled his room, illuminating the walls that had served as empty canvases for too long. He stretched, breathing deeply as he recalled the profound conversation from the night prior. It lingered in his mind, the challenge echoing, "What is your art?" He stared at the blank canvas propped up in the corner, still untouched and intimidating. Today would be different. Today, he would confront the unyielding silence of that emptiness. Yet, the thought of approaching that canvas made his heart race. What if his first strokes felt inadequate? Could he bear the weight of scrutiny, of judgment? Yet, the lingering words of the critic pounded against his fears like a relentless drum. Failure was a pathway to discovery. It was time to confront his apprehensions and embrace the uncertainty that artistically living presented. Mark dressed, the mundane actions of tying his shoes and brushing his hair suddenly feeling charged with significance. He was preparing to step into a new era of his life, one where the past no longer dictated his actions and he would refuse to let fears inhibit his creativity. After brewing a pot of coffee, he sat at his small, worn table, staring resolutely at the canvas. Coffee in hand, his mind raced with visual ideas, images that had been locked away. The dynamism of color, the juxtaposition of light and shadow, his instinct screamed for release. Taking a deep breath, he set the cup down, reached for his paints, and opened a palette he had neglected. Each color shimmered like a promise, waiting to be articulated through his hands. But apprehension seized him again. What if the colors fused into a mess rather than a masterpiece? What if his idea flopped? Would he be trapped in self-doubt once more? Drawing upon Lily's blend of bravery and gratitude, he recalled her belief in him, how her faith surged forth in the face of her own struggles. If she could find her chance, so could he. Mark squeezed his eyes shut, envisioning what he wanted to create: a journey of transforming raw emotions into visual form. It was all about authenticity. With newfound resolve, he dipped the brush into a bold red, letting the bristles kiss the canvas, sending a vibrant hue sprawling across the white void. The first stroke felt liberating, exhilarating. The line became his voice, breaking free from the shackles of anticipation, rebellion against expectations. He painted feverishly, each brushstroke more assured than the last. As vibrant colors entwined, the image began to emerge: the chaos of life, a dance of shadows and light, all struggling yet moving toward harmony. It was a reflection of his inner turmoils, metamorphosing into vivid displays of truth and emotion. But amidst this creative explosion, the specter of doubt still lurked in the background, whispering, "What if no one understands? What if it's not good enough?" Yet he pressed on, feverish with purpose as the canvas transformed. The more he put forth, the more he felt weight lift, as if the layers of fear peeled away with each stroke. Hours flew by, and finally, he stepped back, staring at the tapestry of colors splattered before him. It was raw, it was imperfect, but it belonged to him. Instead of feeling the familiar wash of vulnerability, Mark experienced exhilaration. Creating became an assertion, a defiance against the uncertainties threatening to envelop him. Victory morphed into a new challenge. How would he share this with the world? Was he ready for the risk of exposure, to step beyond the comfort of private creation and into public scrutiny? The overwhelming sense of vulnerability returned, the fear of judgment resurfacing like a dark wave gathering momentum. As he stood in front of his canvas, a new question solidified in his mind: would he allow the judgment to dictate his artistic truth? Determination surged afresh. He had taken the first step in discovery, but this journey wasn't completed. He would find outlets, venues, and voices to express not only his art but his evolving self. Mark reached for his phone, fingers hovering over the contact list. The moment was critical. He wanted to share his creation, his revelation, not just with Lily, but beyond. He felt the urge to reach out to the critic, to invite feedback. What if she, too, recognized his development? His thumb trembled above the screen as he deliberated. He flipped the canvas with a flourish, placing it in full view while contemplating his next step. This was just the beginning, but the real challenge lay ahead. What awaited him when he sought to share his newly awakened artist's heart with the world? With glimmers of excitement and a tinge of dread, Mark prepared to take his next leap into vulnerability. Would this be the moment he confronted not only his fears but also the realities of being a genuine artist? Mark's heart pounded as he stared at the canvas, the colors still wet, the image alive with potential. He understood that the realities of sharing this work loomed over him like a storm cloud, darkening his newfound sense of purpose. Inviting judgment could unleash a torrent of scrutiny. Would he be able to withstand the pressure? What would it mean for his identity as an artist? His phone slipped from his fingers, landing with a soft thud on the table. He retrieved it, contemplating how to frame his message. 2 simple words: I created. In the digital age, art could echo across the expanse of the internet at lightning speed, reaching faceless audiences who may or may not understand his vision. The thought incited a churning mix of curiosity and dread that he paced around the room, the image transforming into a reflection of his own journey, one fraught with struggle but replete with the thrill of self-expression. Who would he invite into his world? The critic had scrutinized countless artists. Was he brave enough to expose his innermost thoughts to her watchful gaze? Mark's resolve solidified. He would offer his art to her, not merely as a plea for validation but as an assertion of his identity forged through uncertainty. If he had learned anything, it was that authenticity was the heart of artistic expression. He swiftly typed out a message to the critic. Hello, I'm Mark. You recently challenged me about my art. I've created something I'd love your perspective on. Are you open to seeing it? As he hit send, a sense of liberation washed over him, mingling with the tension that pocketed his chest. The digital notification chimed back almost immediately, pulling him from his contemplations. "I'd be interested. Send it over." Sitting at the table, the weight of anticipation pressed down on him. He attached a photo of the canvas, the vibrant colors portraying his chaos and struggles, awaiting judgment from a stranger who held the power to shape his fate as an artist. Within moments, an overwhelming sense of vulnerability emerged. This was no longer just a canvas, this was the unveiling of his very soul. Mark realized the challenge was not just about sharing an image, it was about sharing parts of himself he dared not voice. What if the feedback contained harsh truths he wasn't ready to digest? Was he prepared to confront the reactions, positive and negative, that would inevitably follow? Breathless, he turned away from the screen, allowing himself a moment of introspection. Sitting back down with his coffee, he began to mentally dissect the piece. What was the story behind the swirls of red? Could he articulate that when confronted? The act of examining his own motivations illuminated aspects of his creativity he hadn't fully processed. The ticking clock pushed him forward. He had to keep moving. This was an exercise in growth. Finding his voice through his art required not just creating but also articulating its significance. The question loomed, how would he express to others the profound importance of his work? Mark grabbed a notepad and began writing, his thoughts flowing onto paper. He crafted explanations and insights about the art, channeling uncertainty into clarifying statements. The real task lay not only in sharing the visual but in inviting viewers into the emotional landscape it was born from. What emotions drove him to create this piece? How did each stroke symbolize moments of fear, joy, and resilience? As he laid each thought bare, an unexpected confidence threaded through him. Perhaps vulnerability wasn't a curse but a gateway to deeper connections with others. The clock's digital face marked the late hour. Mark paused, realizing he was readying himself for more than just criticism. He was preparing to embrace validation of his journey, but as he polished his notes, his phone buzzed again, breaking his stream of thought. The critic had replied. The message pulled him between excitement and anxiety. "Your work shows depth, but I'm curious about the intention behind it. When can we discuss?" Mark's heart raced. This was an invitation into a dialogue he had long desired, but also a revelation of the impending confrontation. The time had come to face not merely the judgment but the insights that would follow. Mark swallowed hard, grappling with both dread and anticipation. He had pushed through barriers of silence to this point, but what lay ahead wouldn't just challenge his artistic optimism, it would redefine who he was as an artist. Taking a deep breath, he started drafting a time for their meeting. He wasn't just entering a conversation, he was stepping toward a critical transformation in his artistic journey. Little did he know, this session would unveil truths he had long buried beneath layers of self-doubt. As he settled into the words of his invitation, another self-question arose, heavy with significance. What if this conversation leads to the realization of a voice he'd never known he possessed? Mark's heart raced as he finalized the details for the meeting with the critic. He could feel the weight of the upcoming discussion pressing down on him, pressing against the facade of calm he had constructed. This wasn't just an exchange about art, it was a confrontation with a part of himself he had long kept hidden. He stared at his notes again, proof of his painstaking reflections, but instead of giving him reassurance, they flooded him with uncertainties. What if the discussion turned awkward? Would he be able to articulate his thoughts and feelings adequately? The undercurrents of self-doubt twisted within him, surfacing nagging echoes of previous failures when words had betrayed him. Mark sat back, taking a deep breath, trying to reclaim the sense of purpose he had briefly grasped when he created the painting. It was in that moment of creation he had felt genuine. Why was it so difficult to translate that feeling into words? Realizing he had been on autopilot, he resolved to focus. He pushed thoughts of self-doubt aside as he reflected on his original intention for the piece. Each brushstroke had represented a memory, an emotion, an unfiltered moment of himself. It was this raw authenticity he needed to convey. He began crafting a narrative, reconnecting with the emotional underbelly of the artwork. The swirls of red had symbolized rage and passion, the swirling blues embodying sadness. This fusion of colors told a deeper story, a clash of identities, of a boy on the brink of manhood fighting against the tide of expectations. For the first time in a long while, he felt a flicker of certainty. He grabbed the notepad, determined to distill the essence of his piece into clear, coherent thoughts. Writing became not just a task but a ritual, a way to channel his tumult into clarity. What could have been a paralyzing pressure transformed into a vehicle of exploration. He found himself enraptured by the task, exploring his vulnerabilities while constructing a framework to present his work with conviction. But as he penned down his thoughts, reality intruded again, a reminder that the conversation was still an uncharted battleground. The critic would not only dissect his work but also his motivations, perhaps exposing fractures that had grown over the years of self-doubt. It occurred to him then that her potential feedback might act as a mirror, revealing not only his artistry but also illuminating shadows of his character that he had avoided confronting. With a renewed sense of purpose, he understood the meaning of this meeting transcended art critique. It was an examination of his own identity. Steeling himself, he made a list of questions to ask her too. How did she navigate vulnerability in her own work? What, in her experience, enabled her to embrace the feedback of others while remaining true to herself? It was crucial not only to invite judgment but to engage in dialogue that could foster growth. As he prepared, the clock raced on, and he felt both exhilaration and fear surge through him. The meeting wasn't scheduled for another few hours, and already, sleeplessness crept into his mind. He could imagine the critic's open face, waiting for him to share his insights. Tapping the pencil against the table, he refused to let anxiety rule him. He visualized the conversation unfolding. She was there, welcoming, yet professional. Perhaps she would see beyond the colors and into the spectrum of experiences that colored his journey as an artist. The invitation was sent, and now came the moment of truth. Could he step past his comfort zone and dive into heaving waters of creative dialogue? He had confronted his canvases, now the time had come to face an intellectual equal. As the hour drew near, Mark stood up, feeling slightly lightheaded but grounded in resolve. He had maneuvered through the tempest of his emotions and was ready for this challenge. Stepping towards his easel, he turned his focus to the canvas, reconnecting with the heart of his work as he prepared to depict his story through another medium, words. Just then, his phone buzzed again. The critic's message appeared: "I'm looking forward to our conversation. Make sure you're ready for a real discourse." Mark felt a jolt of understanding settle over him. This meeting would be far more than he anticipated. As he considered what real discourse meant, he mulled over the potential ramifications of what lay ahead. Would he emerge transformed from this dialogue, or would he uncover more layers of self-doubt? Without realizing it, he was one step closer to discovering the artist he needed to become. But would he find the strength to accept the truths that came along with that? The hours ticked away, each minute a reminder of the impending confrontation that hung heavy in the air. Yet, as Mark repositioned his focus on the canvas before him, a new sense of clarity emerged. The colors felt more vivid under his brush, each movement igniting flickers of confidence previously buried under layers of apprehension. He wasn't just preparing for an external dialogue, he was initiating a vital internal conversation, one that would challenge him to confront the depths of his creative identity. As he painted, Mark allowed the process to wash over him, liberating him from the weight of expectation. The strokes became more fluid, a reflection of his rising assurance, and assurance fueled by the realization that vulnerability could be a source of strength. Art was not merely a visual experience but a dialogue of emotions, and he now understood the necessity of sharing those emotions with others. The critic's insights would only serve to enhance his understanding, making him a vessel for authenticity. A quiet determination settled over him. He effortlessly put together a mental map that would guide the discussion with the critic. Instead of anticipating harsh evaluation, he shifted his mindset to embrace possibility. What if her perspective could unlock new understandings of his work? What if through her critique, he unearthed dimensions of his art he hadn't yet explored? With intention, he wrote down a few phrases that encapsulated his artistic philosophy. "Emotion is the bridge," he penned. "To create is to expose." He felt the weight of those words resonate in his chest. If he could express his essence through those simple yet potent truths, then he was ready to transcend fear and stand boldly in front of scrutiny. The further he distanced himself from self-doubt, the more he anchored into confidence, and he visualized himself discussing not just his art but his journey as an artist. The clock now beeped ominously, indicating that time had almost expired. Gathering his materials, he organized them meticulously, as if preparing for a performance. Every detail had to reflect the person he was becoming: confident, articulate, and unapologetic about embracing both praise and critique. As he headed out the door, he felt the familiar flutters of anxiety in his stomach attempt to take hold, but he became resolute in stifling them. This was part of the process. Nerves had always accompanied moments of profound growth. He stepped outside into the crisp air, grounding himself in the world that awaited him, no longer just a passive observer but an active participant. The route to the gallery filled his mind with varied expectations. Questions circulated: would he be able to articulate his vision clearly? Would the conversation stray into territory too uncertain for him to navigate? Yet in between those doubts, a quieter voice emerged, a voice that urged him to welcome the unknown, to see it as an opportunity rather than a threat. Upon arriving, he paused for a moment just outside the entrance, collecting himself. The gallery stood as a beacon of artistic discourse, and he could sense the vibrational energy emanating from within. What had once felt intimidating now felt electric. With each step toward the door, he embraced the truth that transparency in artistic expression was a shared human experience. Perhaps in her feedback, he could find reflections not only in his art but in the broader narrative of his journey. Would she uncover the fears that had previously governed him? He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. As he crossed the threshold into the gallery, a sense of inevitability surged through him. The time had come to face his own complexities and doubts head-on. It was no longer just about the artwork, it was about finding his voice as an artist, his truth, amidst the cacophony of judgment. But then, just as he initiated the conversation, a sudden thought struck him. What if this dialogue was not merely a confrontation with his own insecurities, but a potential gateway to redefine his artistic boundaries? Would this engagement push him towards a newfound dimension of creativity? Mark could feel the intensity of the moment weighing on him, those questions swirling around like the myriad colors on his canvas. As the critic's gaze met his, he steadied himself, ready for whatever revelations awaited. The moment of truth had arrived. Mark emerged from the gallery that evening feeling lighter, his heart buoyed by the exhilarating confluence of vulnerability and strength. The meeting with the critic had ignited a fire within him, a realization that art was a dialogue, an exploration of emotions reflecting both triumph and tribulation. He had stepped forward, asserting his identity not only as Lily's advocate but also as an emerging artist in his own right. Where once there were insecurities tethering him to the ground, now there was a palpable sense of liberation. The critic's feedback had been both forthright and constructive, but the true gift lay in the connection they forged: a shared understanding of the challenges artists face and the courage required to emerge from their shadows. Her words had pierced through his remnants of doubt, affirming that authenticity was the hallmark of great art. As Mark navigated the bustling streets of San Francisco, he found himself reflecting on his journey, tracing back to the man who had wandered aimlessly in the rain, consumed by despair and isolation. That version of himself felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by the path he had chosen to embrace. Now, armed with a newfound confidence, he was determined to continue his artistic exploration. No longer would he shy away from the canvas or the judgment of others. Determined to cultivate his voice, Mark returned home, where his canvas awaited him, no longer intimidating, but inviting. He picked up his brush, feeling a rush of purpose flood through him. The bold colors reminded him of his recent triumph and the resolve it had fostered within him. Each stroke was no longer a mere expression of creativity, it was an affirmation of the person he was becoming. Days blended into weeks, each one filled with experimentation and risk. Mark welcomed the chaotic nature of creation, understanding that the beauty of artistry lay not in perfection but in honesty. His pieces began to resonate with the rawness of his experiences: the joy, the heartbreak, the triumph over adversity. The fleeting moments of uncertainty were with him still, yet they no longer controlled him. Instead, they shaped his work, adding depth and dimension. then came the moment of validation he had yearned for. A local gallery agreed to showcase his work, an acknowledgement that his artistic journey had begun to take root. Friends gathered to celebrate this milestone, each euphoric laugh echoing through the space designed to display both their triumphs and struggles. Mark beamed with pride, having successfully merged the two worlds he once thought irreconcilable. From the shadows of doubt into the spotlight of recognition, Mark had proven to himself the power of vulnerability. He stood confidently at the center of his own narrative, an artist, a mentor, and a man willing to embrace authenticity. The clangor of past voices faded, replaced with a collective appreciation of his journey. Tonight, as he stood before magical strokes of color that burst forth from his soul onto the canvas, he could finally say with solid conviction he achieved his personal metamorphosis. Every emotional tempest was reduced to a woven tapestry of artistic expression, each piece now a reflection of his learned truths. The phone buzzed, a reminder of Lily's invitation to collaborate on a project. With a keen eye for her growth, he eagerly agreed, knowing they would face challenges and conquests together. Their friendship had transcended hardship to become a testament of mutual support. Mark smiled as he scrolled through messages of positivity arising from their respective artistic endeavors. He had reconciled his fears of exposure with innate courage, proving his worth not just as an artist but as a nurturing ally navigating the complicated tapestry of life. This was not merely the conclusion of a chapter, but the elegant prelude to expansive horizons ahead. Mark Anderson was ready to embrace whatever came next, a life decorated with authenticity, companionship, and the adventure of self-discovery. Now, it's your turn. You need to subscribe now to not miss out on other life-changing stories. Leave a like now to help spread these important messages and feed the algorithm. Comment with your thoughts on Mark's complete transformation. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who deserve to feel inspired.